For the past 1700 years, Roman Catholicism has captivated the hearts, minds, and souls of billions of faithful adherents. Rome has always claimed that she is the only true Christian church on earth. Her doctrines have been filled with teachings of the compassion of the Virgin Mary and other saints for the average sinner's plight. Yet for the past 1200 years, the Catholic priesthood has been filled with sexual perversion to the highest level imaginable. Today, tens of millions of faithful Catholics are asking themselves how such a sexual perversion could exist in the loving Catholic Church in which they were raised, in which they were married, in which they raised their families, and in which they buried their loved ones. This series, Mother of Harlots, seeks to compassionately and with sensitivity answer the longing question tearing at their heartstrings. In video number 1 in this series, entitled Catholicism, the Church on Haunted Hill, former Catholic Bill Schneblin speaks about his upbringing within the church and his training at a minor Catholic seminary. Bill reveals much of the inner workings of Catholicism and answers many of our questions as to how the clergy could struggle so mightily. This video, Catholicism, Which Queen of Heaven Are They Worshipping?, is the second in this series and demonstrates that Roman Catholicism is not genuine biblical Christianity, but is really a practice of ancient Babylonian witchcraft. While this concept might be so shocking to you as to invite disbelief, former black magic Satanist Doc Marquis compares the two religious systems in great detail, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that Catholicism is Babylonian witchcraft. Doc Marquis was a Luciferian witch in the Illuminati tradition and is thus well equipped to speak to this incredible issue. Now, let us hear from Doc Marquis.
Now, before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, I need to give you some background information so that you can follow us better along in this series. Going back to the original flood of Noah, once everyone came off the ark, Noah had originally 3 sons. That was Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, Ham had a son known as Cush, and Cush had a son known as Nimrod. And this is where we need to begin our focus. Nimrod, his mother's name was Semiramis. What had happened? Because he was a mighty hunter, Nimrod was considered a great hero among his people. But you have to understand about Nimrod that he was not a godly man. As a matter of fact, if you check back in the book of Genesis, you will find out it says, Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Now the word before is the Old English word for against. So in other words, he wasn't for God, he was against God. Eventually, a walled city was built with a giant spiraling ziggurat that went up into heaven, literally speaking. It was known as the Tower of Babylon in the city of Babel itself. And it is at this place where the very first religion was started, and it is known as witchcraft. It's at the Tower of Babylon where we discover that Nimrod and his mother Semiramis really showed just how evil and diabolical their spiritual natures were, because they started this religion in opposition to the rulership of God over his people and the way he wanted them to live. Now, of course, at this point you may ask, what has this got to do with Catholicism? Well, ladies and gentlemen, by the time I am done with this DVD, I'm going to show you more than enough evidence to prove to you that Catholicism is nothing but the original occult religion started by Semiramis and Nimrod. The only thing is, it was just passed down through the historical timeline. Now, there are three people in this story we must focus on. First, Semiramis, next, Nimrod, and then thirdly, the son that they had, which was known as Tammuz. And you are correct when I said that Semiramis and her son, Nimrod, had a child known as Tammuz. Yes, they were having incestuous relationships. Now, if we go back to the stories, the original stories of Semiramis and Nimrod, you're going to find more similarities in what we know what to do with. Now, starting with Semiramis. Semiramis, according to all the stories, the Babylonian Talmud, and everything else in the occult world, was a virgin. And this is one of the depictions of Semiramis depicted as a virgin. Now, does this sound familiar? Because if we look over here, we now have Mary, who is depicted as a virgin also. Now, is there any truth to Mary being a virgin? As a matter of fact, that is definitely a fact. We find out in Luke chapter 1, verse 26 through 27, it says, "And in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God unto a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin espoused to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary." So yes, this part of the story is true. As far as was Mary a virgin? Yes. And we continue on to find out that if we go back over here to the story of Semiramis, supposedly, and I must emphasize this is supposedly now, she was told, spiritually speaking, that she was going to have, and the quote is, an immaculate conception. In other words, she was going to have a child without intercourse. Now, the truth of the matter is that's an outright lie, because Semiramis did not bear her son, Tammuz, till after she was forced to go underground with her occult religion. I'll get back into that later on as we go, folks. But Nimrod, her son, had been slain, and she was forced to go underground with this occult religion, and she told her priest that she was having this immaculate conception. There was nothing immaculate about it, ladies and gentlemen. No. But did an immaculate conception happen? Well, we know, according to the scriptures, one did happen, and again, this was with Mary. We turn over to Matthew chapter 1, and picking it up in verse 18. So that's Matthew chapter 1, picking it up in verse 18. It says, "Now the birth of Jesus Christ was on this wise. When as his mother Mary was espoused to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Ghost. Then Joseph, her husband, being a just man and not willing to make her a public example, was minded to put her away privily," or privately. "But while he thought on these things, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a dream, saying, Joseph, thou son of David, fear not to take unto thee Mary thy wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Ghost. And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. Now all this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which, being interpreted, is God with us. Then Joseph, being raised from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord had bidden him, and took unto him his wife. And he knew her not till she had brought forth her firstborn son, and he called his name Jesus." So yes, we know that this is true. There was, an immaculate conception here, a genuine one. Now, accordingly, Semiramis was an everlasting virgin. Now, do we find this in Catholicism? As a matter of fact, according to Catholic tradition and belief, Mary was an everlasting virgin. Is this true according to the Word of God? The answer is no. No matter what you folks have been taught, that is an outright lie, and I'm going to prove this. If we are going to use the Bible as the ultimate authority of God's Word, of His mind, and of His dealings with His people, then we must search it for the truth. And I'm going to start here in Matthew chapter 12, picking it up in verse 47. Now remember, the belief is that Mary was an everlasting virgin. But that's what Semiramis was supposed to be. Was Mary an everlasting virgin? Well, according to occult practices and beliefs, Semiramis was an everlasting virgin, and if Catholicism, as I've stated, comes from the occult world, then Mary would have to be a virgin according to Catholic tradition and belief. And that is exactly what they teach, that Mary, just like Semiramis, was an everlasting virgin. However, when we go to the ultimate source of truth, by which all things must be weighed, accounted for, and judged by, which is the Holy Bible, we're going to find out that is not the story. We're going to first pick this up in Matthew chapter 12, verse 47. This is what it says. Then one said unto him, Behold, thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to speak with thee. Now, going on a little further in chapter 13, we continue with the same story, picking it up in verses 55 and 56. This is what it says. Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brethren James and Joseph and Simon and Judas, and his sisters, are they not all with us? The Lord Jesus Christ had 4 brothers, according to what the Holy Bible just revealed, and at least 2 sisters, because it clearly stated, among other things, and his sisters, plural. So we know that the Lord also had at least 2 sisters. Now, I'm going to continue with this, ladies and gentlemen, picking this up in Mark chapter 3, verse 32. It says, and we're going to run this all the way through. This is the same account. And the multitude sat about him, and they said unto him, Behold, thy mother and thy brethren without seek for thee. This is the same account. We go over to the next book of the Gospels, known as Luke. This should be Luke chapter 8, verse 20. And it says, And it was told him by certain which said, Thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to see thee. These accounts are all the exact same accounts. You'll find them in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. We find out that the Lord had 4 brothers and 2 sisters, at least 2 sisters, I should say, because it says sisters, which is plural. So Mary, according to the Word of God now, not tradition, not according to Catholic teaching, and not according to occult teaching, Mary was not an everlasting virgin. This belief comes straight from the Babylonian system of witchcraft. You're going to find out as we go down one step at a time that there is absolutely no difference between the story of Semiramis and the story of the Virgin Mary. It just passed down from one culture to another. Now, we know that, according to the stories, Semiramis gave birth to their god, okay? And, of course, this god was supposed to be the reincarnation of Nimrod, who later became known as Tammuz. That's what the baby child was called, Tammuz. Now, is there any truth to Mary having given birth to God? Well, as a matter of fact, that is the truth and the whole truth. we go over to Luke chapter 2, picking up in verse 6, it says, "And so it was that while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn." There was no room for poor Mary in the inn. Now, I want you to understand something here. It did not say her only son. It said her firstborn son. We already found out back in Matthew she had more than one son. Luke even verifies the Lord just happened to have been her firstborn son. That's it. She had 4 more sons and at least 2 daughters. This is scriptural. I am not making this up. I just read it straight from God's word, which is the ultimate source of truth and our final authority. Now, I'm going to show you, ladies and gentlemen, a timeline, a very interesting timeline. And I want you to follow along with me very, very carefully. Thus far, we have already covered 4 points about Mary that are true. One, and remember, we're going to go by the Bible now, the ultimate authority. One is, she was definitely a virgin. She was told through an angel that she would have an immaculate conception. She would also give birth to God, but on this 4th thing, she did not remain an everlasting virgin. That's part of the occult world. And what's further going to tie all these things in will be a timeline I'm going to show you folks right now. One by one, I'm going to show you something, and then I believe the end conclusion is going to startle you for sure. Now here we have a photo of Semiramis, an ancient statue, holding her infant son, Tammuz. You will notice this is a picture of the goddess holding the male god son. In this next one, from Babylon, this belief, this occult practice, mind you, bled into Egypt. And here we have Isis holding her male son, who is also a god, Horus, or who's also known as Horus the Elder. This next one, we have Yasodhara holding the infant child, the god child, Krishna. In this next one, this is a Chaldean mother goddess holding her infant son. In this next one here, we have from Greece, once it got there, Aphrodite, again holding her male son, who is a god, Eros. In this next one, this would be, once it got into Rome, another rendition would be Venus holding Cupid. This is a famous painting done by Rembrandt himself. Over in India, we have Isai holding Iswara, the male son, the god again. Notice she's holding, as I was saying, her son again. Here we have Xingmu of China. Same thing, mother goddess holding her infant son. Then when we get over here to the Canaanites, we have Astaroth holding Baal. This had been broken up. This was unfortunately one of those archaeological things, but that was Astaroth again of the Canaanites and Baal. All these things lead to one simple conclusion, and that is right here. Mary holding the infant God. You see, this is a progression, a historical timeline, if you would. If you would take Mary, who is holding her son, why is she holding her son? Because it comes all the way back here to Babylon itself, where Semiramis was holding Tammuz. It's a progression. You see how the occult world goes from one culture into another, and by the time it got into the Roman Catholic faith, well, the conclusion is obvious. It's the same thing. It came from Babylon and progressed all the way into Roman Catholicism. And the reason it did is because the very first pope, historically speaking, the very first pope himself, Constantine, was a practicing pagan. We will get into this as we get into this DVD. But the fact of the matter is, Constantine was a practicing pagan. What he did in order to swell up the ranks and to make Catholicism universally accepted, even among the pagans, he married the occult religion with this new, quote-unquote, state religion. This is why you see the progression all the way from Semiramis all the way to Mary. This is where it comes from. Now, another thing that is going to become very obvious when we start studying again and comparing Roman Catholicism with the ancient Babylonian system of witchcraft, the very first religion that was ever created, we will find, according to at least the Babylonian system, Semiramis had the power to forgive sins. You see, you have to understand how this works. You will find out that Semiramis had told her priest that this was Nimrod come back in another form, aka reincarnation. While underground, in order to keep control over all her followers so they would never reveal to anyone that their system had now moved underground, there was created for the first time what was known as confessionals. Now these confessionals, basically, these are the exact same ones you're going to find in Roman Catholicism. The penitent person would actually have a talk with the priest, whoever that priest was in Babylon at the time, and confess to the person their sins. Now what that person couldn't see is that all his sins and other things were being recorded, not by the priest, but by someone that was actually with him at the time. This way, should that person ever decide to turn in Semiramis or any of her followers, well, they had a complete listing of what this person was guilty of. They would easily just, bring that to the officials before anyone could stop them, and that person would never be believed, because guess what? He's broken the law, he's got all these crimes against him. They would turn it in a split second to protect themselves. Now, all this under the guise that Semiramis could forgive sins, okay? Now, according to Catholic belief and Catholic doctrines, Mary also has the power to forgive sins. And where do you think this came from? Semiramis herself. Again, it just comes from one occult religion and bleeds right into this one. Now, does Mary have the power to forgive sins? Okay? The long and short of it is she doesn't. We go to Matthew chapter 9, picking it up in verse 6. But that you may know, now this is Christ speaking, but that you may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. This is reserved for Christ. It clearly says he has power to forgive sins. Now, in one other thing, let's go over here to Mark chapter 2. We're going to stop this one in verse 2. We have the same account here of that story where Christ was healing the sick man, and he again says, speaking of Christ, but that you may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sin. And he healed this man because he could forgive his sins. There is nowhere in the Bible where it says Mary has the power to forgive sins. There is absolutely not one verse, not one sentence, nothing in here that says Mary or anyone else has the power of Christ to forgive sins. It just isn't there. This is a tradition. This is, unfortunately, an occult tradition that was brought into the state religion known as Roman Catholicism through Constantine himself, historically speaking, the very first pope. This is how that belief got into Catholicism. We also know that according to a lot of traditions, I mean, when Semiramis died, and I must emphasize died because she really didn't die according to the Babylonian traditions. No, one day she just ascended and wasn't seen again for another year until she came back during what's now known as Easter. We will be getting into Easter later on in this DVD so I can explain the whole of it. But according to Babylonian tradition, she ascended into heaven and she really didn't die, but she would come back. Now, isn't that exactly what they teach when they start talking about the Assumption of Mary? You see, Mary, according to Catholic belief, did not die. No, she ascended into heaven. That's exactly what every single Catholic is taught. Mary did not die. Like Jesus Christ, she was just taken up into heaven. But unfortunately, my friends, this again is just another one of those lies. Mary, like everyone else, is meant to die. Let's go over here to the Holy Bible and find out what it has to say about people dying. Picking it up here in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27, it says, "And it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this, the judgment." So you see, everyone is appointed to die. It didn't say except Mary. There's no exceptions here. Even Jesus Christ himself died. We read the account in the Holy Scriptures after our Lord, God bless him, that he did this for us, but after he died on the cross, for 3 days, he remained dead. But he also had to fulfill the prophecies of the Scriptures to where he would resurrect. Jesus Christ himself died and came back. Mary herself had died. And right now, she is in heaven. Not because she ascended into heaven like Semiramis had. No. She went into heaven because she died a normal death. One of the titles of Semiramis, and the oldest that I am aware of, and remember folks, my background is in the Illuminati. I was a practicing Luciferian witch. I was a 7th generation witch at the time. But one of the traditional, if not the oldest titles that, as we were saying, I'm aware of for Semiramis is known as the Queen of Heaven. Now, this title, the Queen of Heaven, as it pertains to Semiramis, can once again be found in the ultimate source of truth, the Holy Scriptures itself. Going to Jeremiah chapter 7, picking it up in verse 18. This is what it says. And this is, let me give you background here first. What is going on? Sacrifices and other things are being prepared as an offering to Semiramis. And this is what it says. Now listen carefully to the title that they're going to give her. The children gather wood and the father kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out their drink offerings unto other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. This was a family affair. The children here gathered the wood, the fathers kindled the fire, the wives made the dough. And all this was made as an offering to Semiramis, as the scriptures refer to her by the ancient title, the Queen of Heaven. Moving on along, we can stay in Jeremiah. We go to chapter 44, and we'll pick it up in verse 17. Verse 17, it says, "But we will certainly do whatsoever thing goeth forth out of our own mouth to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings," and so on and so forth. Dropping down, also, verse 18. "But since we left off to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, we have wanted all things, and we have been consumed by the sword and by famine." Verse 19 again, they talk about Semiramis as the Queen of Heaven. Picking it up, verse 25 again, it says of these people, "We will surely perform our vows that we have vowed, to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her." This is the most ancient of titles that I had ever learned when I was in the Illuminati for Semiramis. She was always known as the Queen of Heaven, and her symbol was the crescent moon. It was a silver crescent moon, if we want to get very specific. So why is it Mary is now known as the Queen of Heaven? I mean, folks, I want you to understand one thing here. Please understand this. I am not a Catholic basher by any stretch of the imaginations. I don't go around trying to cause troubles for Catholic people. No. What I have a problem with is their occult religion, and that they have been lied to, they have been deceived, and they have been told, if you don't do exactly what we tell you to, we, the priests, have power over heaven and hell. We can determine where you're going to end up, so you will toe the mark. And that is an outright lie. And I'm going to show you these things, folks, as we go along. But let's pick it back up here, because as I said before, you will take a look here. Here is one of those ancient paintings of Mary being crowned as the Queen of Heaven. And as the scriptures point out, this title, the Queen of Heaven, is a very ancient occultic one. It doesn't belong in the Catholic religion if there is nothing occultic about it. In this case, I hate to say it, folks, but like attracts like. Constantine himself, as I stated before, was a practicing pagan, and he married his occult religion into what he called a state religion. Now, as I stated before, the symbol for Semiramis is the moon. Now here's a very ancient stela. At the very top you can see that there's a sun. Underneath there is the crescent moon of Semiramis. The sun would be that of Nimrod, the sun god. Underneath would be the thaumaturgical triangle of Tammuz, the offspring. And here, this picture is a combination of all three. In other words, it represents the first family of the occult world, Semiramis, Nimrod, and their offspring, Tammuz. Now, if we take a look at this one here, you'll find we have the crescent moon of Semiramis, and here is the five-pointed star, what's known as a pentacle. If it had a circle, it's a pentagram of Nimrod, the stag god. And here we have the Greek goddess of the moon, Selene, the goddess of the hunt. But if you notice, again, the female goddess, which actually, Greece, she's come under different names because of the culture. There is the crescent moon. Before showing you anything else, we're going to go to 2 Kings, verse 23. We'll pick it up, chapter 23, and we'll pick it up in verse 5. Yeah, here we go. And he put down the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah and in the places round about Jerusalem. Them also that burnt incense to Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the planets, and to all the hosts of heaven. This was an abomination to God to have any type of celestial symbol or worship of it. This was considered an act of blasphemy. And if you read what happened here in 2 Kings chapter 22, you'll find out, God was cleaning house. Just to paraphrase it all and to shorten it, but God literally was cleaning up house here. Now, as I said, the most ancient of all the symbols for Semiramis is the crescent moon. You can go to any person in the occult and ask them these things. And as again it comes down through the timeline, Constantine brings it into his religion, which is a state religion. And I'm going to show you, here's just another one of those ancient lithographs. This one is again of Mary. And notice the giant crescent moon of Mary. Another one, again, here's Mary, except this one she's being crowned the Queen of Heaven by, looks like a couple of angels. But look again at her feet. There is, again, that famous crescent moon. And in the more modern traditions of Catholicism, they're upgrading, if you would, from the old traditional to quasi-modernist, if you would. This is, again, supposed to be Mary. And look at, and this is a stained glass of her, look at the crescent moon. And here is another one. This is with the hosts of heaven. And if you look once again at the feet of Mary, there is the crescent moon. All these things, this belief as far as the symbology and that of the moon, comes straight once again from Babylon, because it started with Semiramis, just came down the cultural timeline and morphed itself when it came into Roman Catholicism. Semiramis is no longer Semiramis. She is now Mary of Roman Catholicism. But there was a lot of other things that will prove it's one and the same person. If you noticed, when we first started this, Semiramis had statues and idols that her followers had venerated her by. Now the question is, are there statues or idols that the followers of Catholicism worship Mary through? That one, I think, is just all too easy to answer. Let's turn over to 1 Kings 11, I believe it's verse 5. Listen to this. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord, as did David his father. You see, even Solomon fell into the occult trap and was worshiping idols. It says in verse 7, Then did Solomon build an high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is in Jerusalem, and for Moloch, the abomination of the children of Ammon. Moloch, in case you folks don't know this, is just another countercultural idol and false god that originally was Nimrod of Babylon. But if you notice, God did not like people worshiping idols. Idols is not a good thing. Verse 33. And this is what God said. Because they have forsaken me, and have worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, in Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways, to do that which is right in mine eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgment, as did David his father. And at this point, God was removing all but a small portion of the entire kingdom of the Israelites. He was going to severely punish them for daring to worship idols. If we go to just the Ten Commandments alone, and you'll find that that's Exodus chapter 20. Here in Exodus chapter 20, verse 4, this is what it says. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. Did you hear that? Not only are you not supposed to be making these statues, these images, these graven everything, you're not supposed to be bowing down to them or worshiping them. This is forbidden of God. This is right here in Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. But that's not the only place it is found. Over here in Deuteronomy chapter 5, picking it up in verse 6, we move down the same thing, down to verse 8, and tell me if this isn't familiar. Thou shalt not make thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the waters beneath the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself unto them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. You see, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure many people realize this, but the Ten Commandments just isn't found in Exodus chapter 20. It's also found right here, as I just read, in Deuteronomy chapter 5. It starts in verse 6. Now, one thing I have noted over the last 31 years of being a Christian and reading God's Word, when He repeats something, there is something of great consequence and significance that He's trying to get across to you. This is why when He put the Ten Commandments down twice, and this is just about verbatim as far as I recall, He's doing it because He's trying to get these particular precepts of His into your memories to where it's just emblazoned there, to where you will never forget what He's saying and why. You will find out one of the big reasons why He didn't want His children or anyone to make statues or images or idols of anything of heaven or earth above that pertains to him in any form or fashion is because he knows it comes from the occult, and all that stuff leads to idolatry. And this is one thing God would not tolerate. The occult world is an abomination in all its practices in the eyes of God. It doesn't matter which culture it's in or which religion it can be found in. If it's there, it's an abomination to God, and you've got to stop doing it. This is God's commandment. This is how he views these things. Now, according to, again, we go back to the original Babylon practice of Semiramis, Tammuz, and Nimrod. Certain times of the year, Semiramis would come back. She would be seen, and there'd be visions of her and all these other things. Now, as I said before, I will get into that later on as far as Semiramis and the first family of the occult is concerned, later on in Easter. But have there been visions again of Semiramis that can be found in Catholicism under another name known as Mary? Has there been visions? Well, we take a look at this very famous, this is a hand drawing. This was back in May 13th of 1917. This would have been the vision of Mary at Fatima, and this would have been in Portugal. 3 little Portuguese children, Jacinta, Maria, and, oh, I don't remember the little boy's name, but they supposedly had a vision of Mary. And Mary had, among other things, given prophecies to them. Are there other visions of Mary that's been found? Well, this one is the one of Lourdes in July 16th of 1858. This would have been, more than 150 years ago now. But this is one when at Lourdes, this one girl, I believe it was Bernadette was the name, had a vision of Mary, and supposedly the water where Mary had appeared in this grotto had miraculous healing powers now. And this is the same thing we find with Semiramis. And also what you will find with Semiramis is, as I said before, she has her holy days. Mary in Roman Catholicism has her holy days. Semiramis is a co-deity with her son Nimrod. Well, Mary owns co-deityship with her son Jesus Christ. Semiramis is co-redeemer. Roman Catholicism also claims Mary to be a co-redeemer. And I want you to listen to something here very carefully, folks. In Romans chapter 3, I believe it's verse 24, here in Romans 3:24 it says, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. It does not say that is found in Mary. It does not say co-redeemer. All this redemption can be found only in Jesus Christ if we were to believe the Word of God. Ephesians, picking up in chapter 1, verse 17, which, by the way, is after Galatians. It says, that the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, may give unto you the spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him. Notice this is in the knowledge of Christ. All these things, wisdom, revelation, knowledge. We found out in Romans chapter 3, redemption can only be found in Christ. Going over into the next book, which is Colossians. In Colossians chapter 1, verse 14, it was just speaking of Jesus Christ. Here is what it says. It continues. It says of Christ, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins. Notice we get redemption through Christ, through his blood, not through Mary's. And it's through Christ, it says, we get forgiveness of sins, not through Mary. It's right here, folks. Colossians chapter 1, verse 14. Read it for yourselves. And if you go just a little further, you have to go past the T's now. It's Thessalonians, then Timothy, then Titus. And then we get into the book of Hebrews. Now listen to this very carefully. And for this cause, speaking of Jesus Christ, he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. Notice, it was through Christ, who is the only mediator, not Mary, not Semiramis, and it's through him we have redemptions for our sins, not a co-forgiver, not a co-redeemer in Mary, and certainly not in Semiramis, but here it clearly points out this is only done through Jesus Christ. Now, the one last thing I'll do before I wrap this section up, according to occult tradition, Semiramis was born without sin. She didn't. So, where did this lead to? Well, we go by Roman Catholicism. Mary was born without original sin also. She never sinned either. And this is what I find very interesting. Romans 3:23, it says, for all have sinned. All. Not some. Not just these people or that people. It says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Every single person has sinned. The only person who never has is God. Whether he was in the physical form as Jesus Christ or the Holy Spirit, it doesn't matter. God never sinned. He's the only one. Galatians 3, verse 22, yes. But the Scripture hath concluded all under sin. Everyone has sinned, that the promise by faith of Jesus Christ might be given to them that believe. Again, Galatians 3, chapter 22, it is inevitable, folks. Everyone has sinned. Even though they say, according to the occult world, neither Semiramis nor Mary hath sinned, the Bible, the ultimate source of truth and our final authority, says otherwise. Now, as far as excuse me, Mary being without sin, or anyone else. Now, but right now we're sticking unto, these two goddesses, who's the Queen of Heaven. Did Mary ever sin? Could she have ever sinned? Well, not only has the Bible stated everyone has sinned, but I'm going to show you something here. In the book of Luke, chapter 2, it should be verse 22 through 24, and yeah, here it is. And this is after Mary has just given birth to Jesus Christ. Listen to this carefully. And when the days of her purification, according to the law of Moses, were accomplished, They brought him to Jerusalem, speaking of Jesus Christ, to present him to the Lord, as it is written in the law of the Lord. Every male that openeth the womb shall be called holy to the Lord. And to offer, now this is what Mary's doing right now, and to offer a sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. You read the whole account. This is done as a sin offering. In other words, Mary was in sin. Mary had sinned somehow. You have to go back to the book of Leviticus, chapter 12, verse 27. You'll find written in there the accounts of when women, and I'll be tactful here, folks, when they spill blood during birth to male and female children, this is considered, the person themselves, the lady, is considered defiled and impure at that point, and she needs to bring a sin offering for the forgiveness of her sins, according to the book of Leviticus. As I said, that should be verse 12, verse 20. Leviticus chapter 12, verse 27. This is where that should be found. I think it's quite obvious by now when we compare both ladies side by side, it all adds up. There is absolutely no difference here, folks. We could sit down here and argue this to eternity, but the facts remain is when we compare Semiramis to Mary, we have the Queen of Heaven here, we have the Queen of Heaven over here. We have the Mother Goddess over here, Semiramis, we have the Mother Goddess over here, Mary. Oh, up and down, back and forth. It's the same person. And if you remember, look at how Mary, who is now holding her infant son Christ, where did that come from? Again, ladies and gentlemen, it's easily found. It came from Semiramis herself, as she was holding her own infant son, Tammuz. This is where it comes from. This is the state religion which Constantine had created.
In his blasphemous book, The Armageddon Script, Peter Lemercier writes enthusiastically about the worship of the great Mother Earth. He writes as though he is an astronaut in a spaceship in orbit around our planet. As they rounded the barren lunar globe for the last time, and the resplendent half-Earth once again rose from behind the now familiar curved and rocky horizon, what they saw coming up to meet them was strangely familiar. An image straight out of the racial memory, a god out of the world of the archetypes. It was none other than the rounded form of the great Mother Earth herself, clad in the same flowering robes of shimmering blue and white that had been those of Mother Goddess of earth and sky throughout man's history, and not least his most recent Mother Goddess, the Virgin Mary herself.
Now, we are going to continue to part 2, in which we are now going to compare Nimrod to Jesus Christ. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, again, just by using one comparison to another, you're going to start figuring out for yourself where did all this come from. This, again, is nothing but the original perversion and very first occult religion that was found in Babylon itself. We just finished speaking about the goddess of the occult world, known as Semiramis. We are now going to get into the god of this occult world, of the Babylonian especially, since this is where it all began, and his name was Nimrod. Now Nimrod, according to the Holy Scriptures, which we've already discussed, was a mighty hunter before the Lord and started the great city known as Babylon. It was ringed about by a great wall, and they built a giant ziggurat that spiraled into heaven. Now, if we go by this ancient stela, this is a very interesting one. This one shows how over here we have Nimrod, the stars of heaven, and we have his followers over here up this ziggurat itself, the Tower of Babylon, how they're shooting at the stars of heaven and trying to make war with God. Silly thought that, human beings should actually make war with God on his level. It just isn't going to happen. But, I should say, Nimrod thought himself to be a god. So he could contend with the one and only true God, which is absolutely ridiculous. But when we compare Nimrod to Jesus Christ was God. He was human and God. Nimrod himself was a human and supposedly a god. And you're going to find the comparisons between Jesus Christ and Nimrod very, very interesting, because throughout the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, there are 333 prophecies that deal with a coming Messiah, someone that would pay the ultimate price for our sins, and that was Jesus Christ. Now, the one person who will know the Bible better than I ever hope to, better than my friend Chris Pinto ever will, better than any biblical scholar in this life, is Satan himself. Strange as it sounds, but Satan really does know the Bible better than any of us, because he knows the plans of God. He knows what's coming down the road, and he intends to stop them at any price. But God be praised, we know that's not going to happen. But that's not going to try to stop Satan from trying to do it anyways. Now, so he is very well aware of all these prophecies that were dealing with the coming Messiah, Jesus Christ. So in order to stop Jesus Christ from being recognized as the true and one God, he introduced all this stuff that was going to identify Christ as the Messiah and brought it straight into the occult world, so people would think this is what we're talking about. This is where it all comes from. But Satan did that to confuse the issue, so no one would recognize Christ as the true Messiah. Now, according to the myths and stories about Nimrod, Nimrod was slain by his uncle Ham and had his body scattered throughout all the cities around Babylon at that time. I believe there was 8 total, as a warning to anyone who would ever dare practice the occult again and create such abominations before the eyes of God. Nimrod was just taken out and hacked in pieces. Accordingly, he was going to come back through an act of reincarnation. He wasn't going to be dead forever. He was going to come back. And according to the stories, this would be Nimrod coming back as Tammuz. Now here is another picture that shows the soul of Nimrod, who would be coming back to the act of reincarnation as Tammuz. This is where it would come from. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because the thing is, you see, we have Nimrod, who was slain by mortal hands, who would be coming back through reincarnation. And according to the scriptures, we know Jesus Christ was slain by mortal hands, but he came back through resurrection. He was able to bring his own life back. This isn't, we're going to go into another body and go through the wheel of life and come back to the process of reincarnation. No. This was genuine resurrection, where Christ reclaimed his own life. But again, Satan had already put all this information way ahead of time before Christ came, so that the issue could get that badly confused. But the truth is, I'm going to show you how this was done so you will understand it. Now, as I said before, Nimrod, according to the beliefs, was going to come back as his son through the process of reincarnation, and his son was known as Tammuz. Now, I want you to pay close attention over here to his staff. This is the staff of Tammuz, and if you notice, it looks like a cross, but most importantly, look at the pine cone that is atop of it. I will explain this in a bit. Now, here we have an ancient stela of Tammuz, again, holding his staff, and over here it was broken, but you can see if you look here that it was at one time a pine cone. Now, the reason it is a pine cone is because in the occult world, there are certain trees that are considered very, very sacred. In the Illuminati, the most sacred of all the trees to them is the oak, because the oak tree is very strong, very long-lived, and very durable. This is what the Illuminati envisioned for themselves. In Egypt, for their god, the most sacred of all trees was the palm tree. In different places, it just depends, like in Scandinavia, for Odin, his sacred tree would have been the fir tree. It just depends on which branch of the occult you're looking at. But in this system, pine cone is the most sacred. It's the pine tree. So then, why is there? And I'm going to show you this. I have to show you. This giant pine cone is actually in Vatican City itself. This is the pine cone, the sacred pine cone of Tammuz. Now, here we have a picture of Pope John Paul II with the bent and twisted cross. But what I want you to take a look at carefully is that the cross itself is on top of the sacred pine cone of Tammuz. This is the same pine cone.
Before Doc goes on to explain more instances of the pine cone in use in the Catholic Church, we need to pause to examine the bent, twisted crucifix to which Doc has alluded. Please notice the crucifix that Pope John Paul II is holding up to the people at left. Study it closely, and you will realize it is not a traditional crucifix as we show below. Rather, this crucifix is known as a bent cross. But what does that mean? For the answer to that question, let us turn to a Roman Catholic author, Piers Compton, writing in his book, The Broken Cross, Hidden Hand in the Vatican, Channel Islands, Neville Spearman, 1981. This bent crucifix is a sinister symbol used by Satanists in the 6th century that had been revived at the time of Vatican II. This was a bent or broken cross on which was displayed a repulsive and distorted figure of Christ, which the black magicians and sorcerers of the Middle Ages had made use of to represent the biblical term Mark of the Beast. Yet not only Paul VI, but his successors, the two John Pauls, carried that object and held it up to be revered by crowds who had not the slightest idea that it stood for Antichrist. On page 56, Compton prints a picture of the Pope, John Paul II, holding this bent or broken cross, just as we have shown it at the left. Therefore, Pope John Paul II is telling all the occultists the world over that he is not a traditional pope, but a pope that is committed to carrying out the role of the world religious leader as called for in the New World Order plan. Another Roman Catholic author, Malachi Martin, makes this same claim, that Pope John Paul II is committed to the New World Order plan in his book, The Keys to This Blood. Since a picture is worth 1,000 words, we have printed the traditional crucifix to the right. As you can see, the cross here is not bent in any way, top or bottom. Further, the picture of Jesus Christ is a full figure without any kind of distortion or disfiguration. The traditional Roman Catholic crucifix is very, very different from the bent cross above. We Protestants have always objected to the traditional crucifix because it holds Jesus Christ up to continual shame, which is forbidden in Hebrews 6:6. Indeed, this is the basis upon which we Protestants object to the entire Mass, but that is the subject of another article. As you can see, the crucifix which Pope John Paul II is holding up to adoring crowds is not the traditional crucifix, but is the satanic bent or broken cross. This bent crucifix was created by Satanists to depict Antichrist and his mark of the beast. Very soon you will see the appearance of a global leader, calling himself the Christ, who will claim to be Jesus Christ returned, the Jewish Messiah, and the avatar figure for which all the major religions are awaiting, all in one man. This will be Antichrist. Then very quickly thereafter, a global religious leader will step forward to aid the Antichrist. This religious leader will possess the same miraculous power of Antichrist. At this moment, the prophecy of Revelation 13:11 through 14 will be fulfilled. This global religious leader will be the biblical false prophet. The New World Order plan calls for this global religious leader, the false prophet, to be the Roman Catholic Pope.
And if we look over here, we have another one of the same Pope with Christ, as you can see, on top of the sacred pine cone of Tammuz. There is absolutely no difference. This is being passed down from the occult into the occult. That's because it's the same religion, people. It's just got a different name. I tell folks, I don't know how many times I've told people over the last 30 some odd years, the occult religion has never changed. It's always been the same. All that's ever changed were the names. As we went from one culture to another, it just blended in, became part of the whole, and the names changed. That's the only thing. It's always remained the same. Now, what I want you to do is look carefully at this one, folks. This one is going to shock you. This is one of the sacred relics of Catholicism, and this is known as the Grapevine Cross of St. Nino. But what is it? It is an inverted cross that is used in Satanism. That's exactly what it is, folks. And yet, that's supposed to be a sacred relic because it's supposed to have part of the actual crucifix of Christ in it. And this one, folks, this is going to absolutely shock you, but I made sure that this was taken at the best imaging it could because this photo was taken live by CNN when Pope John Paul II was visiting the Holy Mount where Christ gave the Sermon on the Mount. And this was, as I said, this was him doing a sermon right at the chapel there. Now, what I want you to do, not so much as look at the Pope, but look at what's directly behind him. Now, am I just seeing things, or is that an upside-down cross that is only found in the satanic world? Satanism, just like witchcraft, predates, well, Satanism itself, I should say, the beginnings of its practice predates Catholicism by more than 2,000 years. Witchcraft itself, or in this case especially the Babylonian system of witchcraft, which so much of it is found in the Illuminati to this very day, predates Christianity by almost 6,000 years. So, my question therefore is, what is an inverted, upside-down satanic cross doing behind the Pope if this is just a harmless Catholic religion. Now, someone tried to say, oh, well, this is in reference to, I think it was either Peter or Paul, who said that they were not worthy to be crucified upright like Christ, and so he was crucified upside down. Sorry, folks, there's no crucifix there. There's nothing there that even gives you a hint of that. This is the exact same symbol and inverted cross that has been found at, I don't know how many different crime scenes I have helped with over the years. I've worked with local law sheriff departments all the way up to present and former day members of the FBI in helping solve occult crimes. Some of them you might have heard, like the one back in the late 80s. That one was in Matamoros, Mexico. That one was really heartbreaking, and we did a number of shows on that. But the one thing I want you to understand, folks, is symbols like this and such, these are purely occultic. They have absolutely nothing to do with Jesus Christ or his word. And if you remember, among other things, Christ himself said, and even if this is supposedly a true symbol, Christ, God's own word says we're not supposed to be making images or statues or idols of anything that is heaven above or on the earth beneath that pertains to him. Absolutely, zero, zilch, nada. So this has no business being there, especially since it's an ancient occult symbol that predates Catholicism by more than 2,000 years. Now, as I said before, if we take a look here, we see again that ancient stela that shows the culmination of the sun god with the sun, the moon goddess, the crescent moon of Semiramis, and the triangle, which combines to form the god and goddess of the occult world. Okay, these are idols. Every single one of these are idols that were made to worship the false gods in the occult world. And yet, you will find these same idols under different names in Roman Catholicism. Now, again, I want you to take a look at this one. You will find here we have Nimrod, who is, his ancient symbol is a pentagram. Now, we find out that this is his star, okay, the five-pointed star.
Please look carefully at this depiction of the first family of paganism. When the god Nimrod physically unites with the goddess Semiramis, the divine child, Tammuz, is born. This pagan doctrine was invented over 5,000 years ago. Now fast forward into the modern era. Illuminized Freemasonry has adopted this picture of the first family of paganism as the formula by which they intend to produce their Masonic Christ, or Antichrist, on the world scene. Masons believe that the divine child, the Masonic Christ, will be conceived and born on the spiritual plane, and that conception and delivery will be transferred to the physical plane. They believe that this spiritual conception will occur as follows. The Divine Father and the Divine Mother will lay in sexual union in a spiritual dimension, producing the Divine Child, who will appear on the world scene as the Masonic Christ, whom Christians will correctly call Antichrist. How do occultists depict this sexual union between Divine Father and Mother, a physical relationship which produces the divine Masonic Christ? They depict it through the use of the geometric shape, the right triangle. Listen to the explanation of Masonic author R.H. Mackenzie. The right-angled triangle was also regarded as an important figure. Among the Egyptians, the base represented Osiris, or the male principle, the perpendicular, Isis, or the female principle, and the hypotenuse, Horus, their son, the product. This is from Masonic and Occult Symbols Illustrated, Dr. Kathy Burns, page 34. Incredibly, Masonic architect Pierre L'Enfant planned one large right-angled triangle in Government Center, called today the L'Enfant Triangle. Later, under the direction of 33rd degree Mason, President George Washington, a second right-angle triangle was added. That triangle is called the Federal Triangle. These two triangles represent the Masonic plan to produce Antichrist on the world scene. How are the three elements of this Masonic right-angle triangle represented? First, horizontal portion represents the Divine Father. In Washington, D.C., the pagan god Baal is shown in other symbols, so he is the Divine Father. In the Federal Triangle, Baal is represented by 15th Street. Second, the upright portion represents the Divine Mother, which is shown in other symbols to be the corn goddess Cybele. In the Federal Triangle, Cybele is represented by Constitution Avenue. Under this symbol, the goddess is going to become pregnant with the divine child and deliver him at the right moment on the world scene. Because Cybele, the corn goddess, is depicted throughout Government Center, we assume that she will be the Divine Mother. However, black magic Satanists hold that the Divine Mother will be the vampire demon goddess Lilith. Black magic Satanists have long maintained that Lilith will be the one to give birth to Antichrist. Third, the hypotenuse in this triangle represents the divine child, whom we identify in Eye of the Phoenix DVD as being named Destiny. This perfected man, Destiny, is depicted within the tympanum of the Federal Archives building facing Pennsylvania Avenue, the street which represents the divine child. Both L'Enfant and Federal Triangles use Pennsylvania Avenue as their hypotenuse. This hypotenuse is the Masonic Christ, the perfect man, Destiny, who rules the world in the tympanum atop the Federal Archives building looking over Pennsylvania Avenue. Now take a look at this Boy Scout memorial along 15th Street. When Chris Pinto and I scoured Washington, D.C. in preparation for our video, Riddles in Stone, the secret architecture of Washington, D.C., we were walking along 15th Street towards the intersection with Pennsylvania Avenue. Suddenly Chris stopped in his tracks and called me across the park. He was obviously excited. When I ran up to him, he pointed to the statue pictured at the left. The symbolism was instantly clear. This was a depiction of the satanic Masonic belief in how the divine child will be produced on the world scene. What is this belief? Masons believe that the divine child, the Masonic Christ, will be conceived and born on the spiritual plane, and conception and delivery will be transferred to the physical plane. This is precisely what we see in this Boy Scout monument. The Divine Father is shown behind and to the right of the divine child, while the Divine Mother is shown behind and to the left of the divine child. There is no doubt as to who the Masonic Christ is shown to be here, the Eagle Scout. He is the perfected man produced by the Divine Father and Mother. The Eagle Scout featured in this memorial is the perfected man, or the divine child, named Destiny. Notice also where this Boy Scout memorial is located. It is on 15th Street, which is the upright or female portion of the Federal Triangle, and it is only a very short distance from the point where 15th Street intersects with Pennsylvania Avenue, the hypotenuse of the Federal Triangle, representing Destiny, the divine child. Young men who have been proud members of the Boy Scouts have no idea that their beloved scouting are designed to produce perfected men for the coming New World Order.
If we go over to Revelation, and again, I wanted to show you how these things get twisted and perverted in the occult world because of Lucifer. In Revelation 22:16, it says, I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright and morning star. Christ is the bright and morning star, not Nimrod. Now remember, when Christ, I should say when Nimrod reincarnated and became Tammuz, this is where he became fully God. Okay, he took on his whole divine attributes. And we know, according to the scriptures, Christ himself was always divine. He set them aside until he resurrected himself and took them fully back on. Now, in this very ancient statue, you will see the god Tammuz, a.k.a. Nimrod, who has come back in his full glory. As I said, Tammuz, he has the wings and everything. And now this one might be a little tricky to be seen, but what I want you to pay attention to, this is Tammuz again, but look at the pine cone on top of his staff. Again, that is an occult symbol. Now remember, Tammuz was supposed to be Nimrod come back. Nimrod was a mighty hunter. He had used bows and arrows and spears and things of that type of weaponry when he was hunting his animals. And here we go once again. Now, Tammuz, as it says, he came back as a winged creature when he was fully God. Here we have Tammuz when he came, again, a countercultural, this is him as Cupid. You notice, again, the wings, and you notice he has the hunting bow of Nimrod. In other words, this is both Nimrod and Tammuz. Nimrod coming back as Tammuz. It is the same thing here. You will notice he's come back as the winged Eros. And again, if you notice, he has the Fletcher's bow, well, the arrow, and that holds it. But if you notice, again, he has the winged creature as Tammuz, a.k.a. Nimrod, just another form. Here we have the winged apis of Nimrod. Now, this is one of the most ancient symbols of Nimrod. It's Nimrod coming back as a winged creature. And this one, you will find used very, very heavily in the Masonic world. Here we have an ancient stela that shows Nimrod, who had been fighting a lion. He had shot him with an arrow, and right below here, I believe he's thrusting a sword to finish him off. But this shows that this, again, is Nimrod, the so-called mighty hunter who was against God, not for God, but against him. Okay? And here again is an ancient belief. Someone decided to take it off and draw it by hand just to see what it looked like. But this is, again, the winged god, Nimrod, after he came back glorified. And again, if we pass it down, here is Nimrod. Well, Nimrod was also known as Marduk of the Babylonian legends, going up against Tiamat, the dragon. Notice the arrows, the wings, and everything. Again, the mighty hunter. Okay? And one other thing, just show you folks, remember, I want to remind you, here is his mother, Semiramis. I point this out again to remind you folks. Semiramis was supposed to have been a goddess. This is how, among other things, her son Nimrod became a god. He had divine powers, and after he died, he came back through reincarnation. Not resurrection as Christ, but reincarnation. So you can see how these things agree easily. Remember, Nimrod was known as the sun god. His symbol was the sun. As you can see, the sun itself. Christ himself is known as the Son of God. Christ himself is known as the King of Kings. We will find this in Revelation, I believe it's 1916. Was it 1919? 16, here we go. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. God be praised, that's fantastic. Now, Nimrod himself is known as the King of Heaven. These things just keep passing down one after another. In this case, Lucifer made sure that all this definitely was put way ahead of time. So, as I said before, it would confuse the issue. No one would recognize Jesus Christ as the true Messiah when he came. And what's even confused it more is Tammuz's birthday happens to be December 25th. It was not Jesus Christ who was born on the 25th. We will be getting into this later on in this DVD. You will find out on Christmas, you are not celebrating the birthday of Christ, but the reincarnation in the birth date of Tammuz, the winter god. I'll get into that later. Okay. But anyways, here is one of the oldest beliefs of the stag god himself. You will notice he is holding, well, first of all, he has the exact same horns of the stags. He is also holding what looks like the ancient symbol of the Ouroboros, the serpent entwined in itself. This is, as we were saying, the stag god of the occult world. When you worship on Christmas, believing you're worshiping Christ, this is who you are actually worshiping. This is the stag god. Come back again as Tammuz, because it was Tammuz that was born on the 25th. This is who you're worshiping. Not Christ, but this. And as I said before, we are going to get into this towards the end of this DVD. But I will show you, again, what Christmas is truly all about for you people who haven't seen this, and for you poor followers in Roman Catholicism who actually think and are convinced that Christ was born on the 25th. You're going to find out. That, again, you have been lied to. So, as you can see, it's very easy once again. When we start comparing Jesus Christ to Nimrod, you're going to find out, and especially through God's Word once again, that the life, the death, and the reincarnation of Nimrod is exactly that, of the life, the death, however, but the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Satan, once again, has just tried to confuse the issues, so this way no one, when Christ did show up, would recognize him as the true Messiah. This is part and partial of why the occult religion was started, because it would take all the worship away from God, it would take all the followers away from God, and put them in a false religion known as the occult, to where they could never get saved, and God's plan would never be fulfilled. This is why it was done, and it continues on in this very day, ladies and gentlemen, in the occult religion known as Catholicism. And what we're going to do right now, this next part, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely going to stun you. But I'm going to show you from, in this case, an ex-Illuminist perspective, why Roman Catholicism and the occult world are actually one and the same. And after I'm done with this, ladies and gentlemen, this next part, I can't see any other greater evidence that I could give. So without further ado, we're going to end this section and we're going to move on to part 3. Here are part 3 of this DVD, which is called Catholicism, Which Mary Are They Worshipping?, in which we are now going to compare an occult Mass to a Catholic Mass. Now, over the years, I have been very fortunate to work with many different law enforcement agencies, ranging from sheriff departments all the way up to and in between the FBI with former and present-day members of the FBI. And I have done and worked with them on a number of occult crime scenes. A lot of times you will see me on different television shows that I've done this for, such as, like Oprah Winfrey, Geraldo Rivera, Hard Copy Inside Edition, 2020, Unsolved Mysteries, and many places around the world. And I've been very fortunate that God has allowed me to reveal the truth of what's going on in the occult world to everyone else. Now, what I'm going to do in this live demonstration and when I start building, and I'm going to build literally right in front of you 2 different type of altars. We're going to use this table here as the altar because I just don't have as much space as I would like in this giant setting, but nevertheless, to get 2 altars in here would be next to impossible. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use this as just an altar. I'm just going to sort of like minimize it. But nevertheless, you're going to see all the same items. Just bear with me. And what we're going to start doing, I'm going to build the occult altar on this side, and then I will build the Catholic one on this side. Now, using, as I said, different things from different occult crime scenes, this cloth that I will be using to cover this, shall we say, makeshift altar was one that I found covering an occult altar. Okay? So, we find out that in the occult world, now remember, and it's very important for you to remember this as we build these altars, that this altar on my side, it'll be on your right-hand side, your left, excuse me. This altar and its practices precedes Roman Catholicism by more than 4,000 years. And there, literally speaking, there are no other religions other than those related to Roman Catholicism, unless it's the occult, that will build the altar as the Catholics do. Just follow me here. So here we have the altar covering from the occult world. And then, on this side, on the Catholic altar, what they will do, you will see a common white cloth that will be covering their altars. Now, interesting enough, on the both altars, the altar cloth will change colors according to the seasons. A lot of times you will find white, sometimes you will find a different color, and this is holds true with the different robes that the witches and a Catholic priest will wear, and the same thing with the candles that will be used during the services. A lot of this has to do with the season and, the particular holidays, or holy days, as it's called in the Catholic world and in the occult world. Now, the next thing both of them have is what's known as a deity symbol, or a god symbol. For the occult world, this is one of the oldest ones in existence. If you remember, we had showed a stela that showed the unification of Nimrod, the sun god, Semiramis with her moon goddess symbol, and Tammuz, and where they unified into one particular god. And of course, over here on the Catholic altar, they have their god symbol. Now remember, these things are going to go, as we build both altars, be mindful, again, that the occult world was around more than 4,000 years before Catholicism. But as we go along, you're going to see that both altars are going to have just about the same things in commonality. And it's only in Catholicism, or the branches of Catholicism, that you're going to find all these things in the occult world, which, of course, was stolen by Constantine from the occult world and came into his state religion, which he called Catholicism. Now, both sides on their altars, they will have various candles. And of course, over here, once again, there's no denying it, on the Catholic altar, you will see the same candles. Now, interesting enough, at this particular crime scene, I found in this particular God symbol, one gold candle and one silver one. I believe you folks can guess why by now, because the gold represents Nimrod, and of course the crescent moon, the silver, as we said before, represents the goddess, Semiramis. Now, the next thing you will find at both of them will be incense. Now, these were the ones, some incense, that was at that particular crime scene. And with the Catholic ones, usually you'll find an incense burner similar to this, swinging on a chain. I believe it's called a thurible. And the one thing that's interesting is I noted that both incense were the exact same as far as which scents they had used. And usually you'll find on this side of the altar, I wasn't able to bring them, certain things I couldn't bring to this DVD now because of restrictions on air flights. Okay, there's a lot of restrictions now, but suffice it to say, there are bells here on this side, and over here you'll find them also. With both groups, you will find a holy book, something that has various prayers, rituals, and such. I put them in this folder. There was quite a lot of different materials, the rituals and everything that they were using for this scene, this crime. So we'll put that there. And here is, and I was able to borrow this from a marvelous Christian family who I love dearly. They're known as the Shaleskis. That would be Lynn, Belinda, and Cody. But this is a 200-year-old, well, it's more than that. The oldest date, as I remember, I found in here is 1800. It is a Catholic Bible. And so, of course, they have a holy book that they read out of just like they do in the occult. In the occult world, it's known as the Book of Shadows. Here, of course, the Catholic Bible, it would be the Douay translation of the Holy Scriptures. It's the only one that is approved by the Vatican. And it's generally accepted by them if it has, as a matter of fact, this cross. It's known as the Imprimatur. This one is partially red. The Catholic one that has it, it will be entirely red. You will find this cross in the Catholic Bible. It is known as the Imprimatur. Now, at this particular scene, interesting enough, I forgot to mention that in these paperwork and all the rituals here, there were different prayers and such to their gods and goddesses. Now, on the Catholic altar, you're going to find a book. It's not always the Holy Scriptures. This will be sometimes on another section in the podium. Sometimes it will be here. But if it's here, a lot of times it's the one that has their rituals in it and their prayers. So you can see you have your rituals and prayers from here, the ritual and prayers over here. Same thing, just different names. Now, of course, again, using this crime scene, I found their sacrifice. Bread was found there, among other things. It's an offering, to their gods. We found bread. Now, before, shall we say, the modernization movement, the bread was actually the same type that was used in the occult mass. Now they stamp it into a sun god circle. That's what you find. It's known as a wafer. It is circular. It is, whenever you see the gold circle especially. That is the most ancient symbol for the sun god. And that would be that in the Babylonian, that would be Nimrod. But as it came down, it became Ra, the sun god in Egypt, and it just kept going on and on and on until it ended up in Catholicism, the latter of the occult religions. But again, you're going to see it's all the same. The only thing that changed was the name. So, oh, and from there, you will notice when the priest comes in, he comes in from an alcove, he's wearing, a lot of times it's just a black robe with the white on it. Sometimes it's a green one or a purple one or a red one. Depends again, as it says, on the holiday and the season. It varies. And they will be followed by their attendants who will attend to the altar and their needs. This is the exact thing in the occult world. You have the priest and the priestesses come in, and they have their attendants who will attend to their needs or whatever else is needed during the service. This is where Constantine got it from, so he could bring it into Catholicism, because this is how it's done in the occult world. Now, in the occult world, they also have various items that they do use, just like in the Catholic one. In the occult one, they have their chalices that is used for their ceremonies. Okay? This is the exact same thing you will find in the Catholic world. You will find their chalice used during certain things. Now, this one was covered, and it had a white cloth covering it. Now, interesting enough, this cover goes on top of their chalice, and it's covered with a white cloth also. Now, if you remember, here is, as I warned you before, the most ancient symbol for Nimrod himself. You can find this in occult books, ladies and gentlemen, if you want. But I want you to take my word for at least this one part. The gold circle, which is the most ancient symbol for the sun god. And it is on top of the chalice, and it's covered with a white cloth. This is the same thing we find over here. Now, during the service, the priest, and this is what it is claimed. Now, I want you to understand, according to Catholic doctrine, and this is carved in stone, that the priest has certain powers or certain miraculous abilities. He will take wine and pour it into the chalice. And in the occult world, the same thing is done. Now, I want you to understand there's two major differences here, but actually, they're all, according to Catholicism, it's the same. Now, in the occult world, and I will tell you right now, if you're in the Illuminati or in certain other groups, what is in this chalice is human blood. Because in the occult world, they believe in human sacrifices. And yet, as a born-again Christian, I know this is contrary to the Word of God, because in Romans 12:1, it says, I beseech you that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. No human sacrifice in any form whatsoever in true Christianity. Now, they have, if they're practicing human sacrifice, they're going to have their blood offering and the flesh of their victim. Now, in the Wiccan beliefs, or the pagan beliefs, or the goddess worshippers, or any of those other tree huggers, forgive me for putting it to you that way, but they will also have, remember, their bread offering to their god and goddesses. But remember, if this is a group of Luciferian witches in the order of the Illuminati or what is a satanic cult, I guarantee you folks, and I know the crime scenes I've worked and others that have reported the same thing, this is actual blood and you have the flesh of their victims. Now, is it different in Roman Catholicism? No. And I'm going to tell you why. Accordingly, in Roman Catholicism, their own creeds, doctrines, what have you, state that the priests have certain miraculous powers. In this case, one is known as transubstantiation. Now, literally speaking, it is believed that the priest, he can take what used to be the regular bread that was used in the occult world, but now it's the sun symbol, as I said before. He can take the bread and the wine that is poured in the chalice and literally make this, because of his powers. Where he got them from is a question. It's believed it's an apostolic accession thing. Okay. He can take this and turn it into the actual physical flesh of Jesus Christ, and this he can turn into the actual blood of Christ. It is not symbolic. According to their own dogma, this is, once it goes through the process of transubstantiation, this becomes the literal flesh of Christ and the literal blood of Christ. Literally speaking, that's it. So then, answer me this. In the Illuminati world and in the satanic world and certain other occult branches, they have in their chalices the blood of their victims, and in various bowls and things like this, the flesh of their victims that they offer up to their gods and they eat. What is the difference? They claim this is, in Catholicism, the actual flesh, the real flesh of Christ that's been changed by the priest, and this is actually his blood. This is called human sacrifice. Hebrews chapter 6, verse 6. I want to read to you, ladies and gentlemen, an interesting verse here. Remember, this is Hebrews 6, chapter 6. This talks about people falling away from the faith and coming up with rituals and ceremonies that would sacrifice Christ over and over again. Listen to this. If they shall fall away, to renew them again unto repentance, seeing they crucified to themselves the Son of God afresh, and put him to an open shame. What it is saying again, if they shall fall away and renew themselves unto repentance. In other words, the first time wasn't good enough for them. It isn't sufficient. This is the whole thing about the occult system of Roman Catholicism, and the same thing in the occult world. This is not sufficient enough. When Christ died on the cross, it wasn't enough. They have to do it over and over and over again through rituals, through dogmas, through various practices, beliefs, by wearing scapulars, by bowing down and worshiping idols over and over and over again, so that they can work up enough of grace points to where in Catholicism they end up in purgatory and they can work themselves up into heaven. In the occult world, they have that mid-ground also. In Catholicism it's called purgatory. In the occult world it's called Somerset. Yet they believe they come back through reincarnation to go on and to become better people. and eventually they become gods and goddesses. And it's the same thing here in Catholicism. Eventually, they work themselves up into their paradise also. And this is where it comes from. Now, in the occult world, they have their various religious symbols and such. If you remember, as I stated before, the oldest symbol for Nimrod is a 5-pointed star, and this one is a 6-pointed star, which in the occult world is known as a hexagram. You need to use that one if you're going to literally summon, and I mean literally summon, to this plane of existence a demon. Now here we have various Catholic items also, jewelry, medals, and other things that they have that their followers will wear. They also have various medals, rings, and such they wear. Here is one that bears the same cross that the Pope will usually wear. And here we have on this ring a very horrible scene of Christ being crucified. And this is, you know, what a faithful Catholic would wear. This one is just a cross, if you, without all the serious knotwork of this Celtic cross that you will also find on the vestments of a Catholic priest, especially the Pope. You'll see that as we go further into Catholicism in our next part. But these here, again, we just have a couple of simple Catholic items, medallion, jewelry that represents their religion. And again, this practice comes from over here, from the occult world. And you're going to find, again, these same symbols that will be used in Catholicism. Remember the crescent moon that denotes Semiramis? Well, we found out that in Catholicism, Mary, in all those artworks and things that I had shown you, the crescent moon was there also. You will find also the sun symbol, which denotes Nimrod. And here, once again, you will find the sun symbol of Nimrod, but this time it is used as a cover for supposedly the actual physical blood of Christ himself. Now, again, because of rules and regulations of air flight, the wine and the bread and other things we had to get here, and the same thing with this thing. This contained actual holy water. As a matter of fact, if we, right here, it has a picture of the Virgin Mary. It might be difficult to see, but that is Mary on it. And this was supposed to contain holy water. Now, interesting enough, in the occult world, they use holy water also. And the most fascinating part about this is, remember, the occult, especially witchcraft, came 4,000 years before Catholicism. How they bless their water, they take regular water, take a pinch of salt and put it in it, lay their hands over it, pray over it, and suddenly it's holy. In Catholicism, the priest does the exact same thing. They will, you will walk in, dip your finger in the holy water and bless yourself. That water is created the same way as they do it in the occult. They take regular water, they will take a pinch of salt, put it in it, the priest will lay his hands over it and pray, and now it is holy. Why? Because, like those witches in the occult, he has miraculous powers also. And that's how both, again, it's the exact same thing, have water, holy water in this case. In the occult world, just as in Catholicism, they have various, shall we say, rules and regulations. In the occult world, they have what's known as the Eightfold Path. In Catholicism, they have what's known as the Seven Sacraments. On this side, the occult side, we have what's known as the Wiccan Rede or the Golden Rule, and over here they have what's known as the Golden Rule. You You see, the end result is, ladies and gentlemen, and this is, I haven't even gone into everything that you can bring to something like this as far as just involving the altar and the ceremony. I could have gone a lot further than this. But again, as I said, there are restrictions to air flights and what I can bring and what I can't bring. But I believe I have demonstrated enough that you can see that over here on the Catholic altar side, everything here was stolen from the occult side. This side was around 4,000 years before this one came along. And don't try to convince me that, oh, they just came up with their own way of doing it. No, it is the exact same way. It is a picture-perfect image of what is done in every single occult system. We have Wiccan, or I should say the old Babylonian witchcraft, and over here we have the Catholic version, and forgive me folks if I offend you when I say this, but the truth be known, we have the Catholic version of witchcraft. It is the exact same thing. Especially what scares me is when they claim this is the blood of Christ. This is supposed to be the actual physical blood of Christ once the priest has transmuted it through the power of transubstantiation. Same thing with the blood. Through the power of transubstantiation, this is now the actual physical body of Christ. And over here, once again, we have the actual physical blood of their victims. If this was an actual chalice that was just used right now for an Illuminati ceremony or one in Satanism, and this was the same thing, I guarantee you, this would be actual physical blood and human flesh that would be offered up to their gods and then eaten. You can't deny the fact, no matter how hard you try, especially since it's a historical fact once again, and this is written in the records, especially if you read the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. It is a documented fact that Constantine himself was a practicing pagan. And according to all the old writings and everything that's left behind, Constantine himself, as a pagan, declared he was going to make the state religion, and what he did, he took his occult background, brought it over here, and created a state religion which he called Catholicism. He called it Catholicism because he was hoping it would be the universal religion. This is what Catholicism means, universal. But it is not universal because a Christian, and I mean a true born-again Christian, by the Word of God, would have nothing to do with any of this. Because this is just re-crucifying Christ over and over and over again and saying that the cross was not enough. That it has to be done literally more than 1 billion times a year over the world. So Christ is crucified again and again and again. And you have to work up all these grace points if you have a chance of getting just to purgatory. And in purgatory, you're supposed to get purified so you can move on. And it's the same thing in the occult world. You just go to summer's set, you get purified, and you move on. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, there's really no difference. Let me just say that, and again, I want to emphasize this. I'm not doing this to be a Catholic basher. I have nothing against Catholic people, I really don't. I'm just so sorry that they've been lied to, that they've been deceived, that they've been cajoled into believing all this. But the fact remains is, you just compare one to the other, and remember, in this case, this chicken came before this egg. By more than 4,000 years, the occult was around. They match up perfectly. And this is the only major religion in the earth, ladies and gentlemen, that does match up perfectly with the occult world, and that's because it came from the occult world. They're one and the same. There's no difference. What we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to end it here, and we're going to move on to part 4, which we're going to get into a little bit deeper into Catholicism itself, again by using different comparisons and contrastings, and I think you're going to find this next part, ladies and gentlemen, really, really interesting.